It might be 10 degrees outside, but now is the perfect time to begin designing a new garden bed.
Believe it or not, but underneath all of this snow is an empty garden bed just waiting to be planted. And because it's so cold outside, let's head inside the house and take you through all the awesome plants and plans we have for this space in 2025.
I, for one, am really glad that we came inside.
Yes, I agree. I'm Eric.
I'm Christopher.
And we garden in upstate New York, Zone 6A.
We are truly having a Zone 6 winter. It hasn't been this cold in a few years, but we have been below -5, not below -10, so we're right in that Zone 6A pocket. And yes, it's a little bit difficult to be outside, so now, yes, it is the perfect time for us to sit down, go through some plants, go through some plans, and talk about what we're going to do with this pretty significant new garden bed.
I know, last fall we did something pretty bold. We went in and we pulled out our limelight hydrangea hedge. That limelight hydrangea hedge was gorgeous and we loved it. It was planted in 2018, one of the first things we put in on our property. This is a new construction property. It was flat and bare when we moved in. We wanted some privacy. We wanted something that could handle full sun and something that was gorgeous. So we chose limelight hydrangeas. 6, 7 years have gone by. Our tastes have changed. Our skill level has changed. The maintenance of the rest of the garden and the needs of the rest of the garden have changed.
Yes.
And so we decided to take that space that the limelight hedge was occupying and use it in a totally new way.
Yes. So what we're going to be doing is taking this monoculture, very straight line hedge that doesn't exactly match with what the rest of the garden's moving towards. And we are creating did we say like 88 feet long?
It's 88 feet of new garden space.
Yes, and in some places it's as deep as 16 feet, where it was previously only 6 feet deep. And we've created this curving bed that creates almost like there's a beautiful section that's going to be a rounded path in the grass. And it gives us this opportunity to really say, hey, what have we learned over these last 6 years? What can we do? And that is such an exciting opportunity. Yes, it was a big, bold move, and they are all happily planted at some neighbors' houses, so we'll be able to visit them, and also at one of our good friends' houses. So you might even get a peek at them sometime this summer.
And our taste has changed, and we've kind of developed our style as time has gone forward. We kind of garden in a contemporary cottage garden aesthetic. And so what this new space that we've created is going to allow us to do is really solidify that design style in our garden and take you along for that journey. And a couple of the components in contemporary cottage garden that we really try to stand by is that mix of undulating beds, lots of color, lots of texture, contrasting forms, big drifts of gorgeous flowers that bloom at different times of the season, but contrasted with stone and modern lines and dark colors of hardscape and hard goods.
Our terrace, the raised terrace, is in the stone, and it's all very rectangular. And then all the garden beds around it give it this more whimsical, a little bit of romantic, just kind of lush plantings. You'll notice that we like to really mix up our shrub, perennial, annual, bulb, things from seed.
Evergreens.
Evergreens. Yeah, we're going to start with evergreens. But all of those things mixed together in a very cottagey, homey, loose kind of way up against that nice, strong, modern hardscaping. Before we share with you some of the really cool plants that we're going to be putting into the west border, we wanted to give you some of the general guidelines that we follow when we begin any design process, be it big or small. Of course, we're going to be taking into account growing zone, light exposure, soil moisture, and that kind of stuff. We'll kind of set that aside for right now. But when we're talking about just this design element, these are a couple of the things that we are going to be focused on.
Our garden has been growing and building and expanding since 2018. And so how we deal with a new large space is we break it down into small spaces, and we like to call it our little vignettes. And so we take moments in the garden and we curate the perfect vignette. And you take that vignette and it's stacked next to this vignette and it's stacked next to this vignette, and then it all comes together in the end. Trust us. So within this vignette that we're working in, I want you to think about your 4 foliage colors: purple, yellow, green, and blue. So a great example of a plant with a purple foliage color would be a Winecraft black smoke bush with that dark rich purple, a wine and roses weigela, a stay classy purple leaf sand cherry, something like that. Then we move into a plant with a yellow foliage, and it could be something like a birch leaf spirea, like Sesky Gold. It could be like a Winecraft Gold smoke bush, something in that vein. Something green, we could do
Lots of green.
lots of green. That's probably the easiest one to
Pretty
come
easy.
by. But that could be any hydrangea. It could be basically any rose. And then you want something with blue tones to it, a Fothergilla, a blue tinged evergreen, anything like that. So you want to make sure within your vignette you have those color contrasts. In addition to that, you want to think about the form of the plant, how tall it is, how short it is it wide, is it going to be very narrow, how is that going to contrast with the plants around it, the texture of the plant. If a plant has a very spiky texture and you put it next to another plant with a spiky texture, they're going to get lost in each other, so you want to have a bold texture next to a spiky texture. So we have the form, the texture, and the color of the flowers.
Yeah.
So we tend to stick with pinks and purples and blues and soft yellows and like very pretty soft colors.
You're probably not going to be seeing a lot of red and orange in our garden. It's just not the color palette that we go for.
And yeah, and because we're in the Northeast, we have a winter where everything that's deciduous loses its leaves. So we also in our vignettes like to make sure that there's always an evergreen specimen.
Absolutely. Winter interest is key because we do have a 5-month time where we're just looking out the window and we see a lot of white sometimes, but those structures that you can build with evergreens, and honestly there's those bonuses of oak leaf hydrangea that give you some of that cinnamon peeling bark a little bit. So don't let your deciduous plants throw you off from winter interest. But I think those are really the key things that we look at as a whole when we're doing a design plan. So without further ado, why don't we jump into some plants?
Looking at the new west border as a whole, we wanted it to complement the east border where the centerpiece is a Trome Nar spruce, a gorgeous blue needled evergreen. But we didn't want it to match, so we're going with a centerpiece on the west border that is totally different, but is going to be just as gorgeous.
Yes, we are going in with a Japanese maple called Arctic Jade. This is a pretty cool new variety. It's from Iseli, where they have taken a Korean maple that's a little more hardy and a Japanese maple that's the beautiful tree we're used to. And they bred in some of that hardiness so that it can survive all the way down to zone 4. Some Japanese maples would be kind of marginal for us, so this is a really good opportunity. We have Frederick joining us. Hello, everybody. And it's an incredible, beautiful tree. It's going to get about 20 feet tall, 15 feet wide. So really a nice, not tremendous tree, but like more than just like a ornamental specimen kind of tree. It has large, very deeply cut leaves. They stay green throughout the growing season, which is, I like a dark leaf Japanese maple, but I really do like a big green tree. And I think that'll be really nice. It'll be turning orange and red in the fall. And then I was thinking how we have our Diana contorted larch that'll turn yellow in the fall. So from the terrace itself, really cool layering effect. And that's really going to be the main feature of sort of that deep, big initial curve that we're going to be working from.
And I don't know if we said, but this is going to be a full sun bed, and this Japanese maple can handle full sun in our growing zone. I think maybe at the higher end, it would probably need some afternoon shade, but for us, it'll be fine with full sun. Another like really cool specimen-y focal point type tree is going to be, and I hope I'm saying this right, it is the Arns dwarf. It's an Abies Nordmanniana.
Nordman fir.
Yes. Did I say the Latin name correct though?
Nordmanniana.
We have a cheat sheet right here.
Yes, we have a little cheat sheet.
Nordmanniana.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, it's a Norman fir. It's got short, dark green, blunt tip needles that have 2 white stripes on the underside. So it's a little bit of this bluish green. It's got the white stripes, kind of like the Vanderwolf pine that we love so much. It gets 8 feet tall and 2 feet wide after about 10 years. Pretty slow growing. Prefers full sun. It's hardy down to zone 5. I really like the structure of this tree. I think that because we do want evergreens, but we don't want like evergreens
Right.
that get enormous and take over. This is going to be a great specimen to have in the west border.
Do you have any ideas about where this might be popping in, or is this just going to be filling in?
So we already have the Moffat Blue Juniper at the back, and down here we also have a little cheat sheet here. And I'm thinking, and hopefully Christopher can show this on the screen, that it's probably going to end up here-ish.
Oh, I like that. That's a great idea.
I think it's going to end up around there. So you see it layered with the Arctic Jade, and then the next tree that's going to be also layered kind of right here in front is the Firefly Oriental Spruce.
Yes, this is a really awesome, very beautiful yellow evergreen. It's a slightly more compact yellow version of the more commonly known Skylands Oriental Spruce. This one's going to get about 6 feet high, 4 feet wide, zone 4 hardiness, and it will take full sun. I think most evergreens that we're going to be bringing in really do prefer full sun, except maybe one at the very end we'll talk about. But this is going to give, I mean, automatically we're going to have the yellow next to that bluish color. We've got the green and the Arctic Jade. So we're doing pretty good on adding in those foliage colors automatically.
And we have the green of our next evergreen, the green screen arborvitae. It's an introduction from Iseli. It's a new type of arborvitae with a beautiful deep green, smaller version of a green giant. Kind of that similar, same like cascading structure.
Feathery.
And it's very highly fragrant. It gets about 10 feet tall, 5 feet wide, so it's not too enormous, and it's hardy down to zone 5. And it prefers full sun. It is not deer resistant though.
No, and we already have 2 of them in the garden, and we love the texture of them, so we thought, you know what, we need to put some of these in the new border. On the east border, across the garden, we have 2 emerald green arborvitae, the more traditionally known kind of columnar arborvitae. So these are going to kind of repeat, but in a different way, that same kind of effect.
Yes. But what I really want to talk about are things that flower. My favorite type of flowering shrub, hydrangeas, which you might kind of be chuckling to yourself because we just took 15 hydrangeas out. But we're going to be putting over 20 hydrangeas back in, believe it or not. Different sizes, I mean, not as large as Limelight. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds we're putting back in. But we wanted to share 2 that we're particularly excited about. The first one is the Powerball Panicle Hydrangea, another panicle hydrangea like Limelight that blooms on new wood, so we're guaranteed flowers every year. Much sturdier stems than on the Limelight and much more compact. It's 3 to 6 feet tall and wide, hardy in zones 3 through 8. And what makes Powerball Panicle Hydrangea so cool is the blooms on it are so rounded like a ball that it could, we've been told, be mistaken for a mophead hydrangea or an Annabelle type hydrangea because it's got a much rounder bloom than the traditional panicle shaped flower on a panicle hydrangea.
Right. And ironically, talking about those round hydrangeas, we're also going to be bringing in a hydrangea that will be newly released next year. Powerball is in garden centers this year. We're going to be bringing in Incredible.
Is it this year?
Yes, Powerball's this year. Incredible Stormproof comes out next year. So we are going to get our hands on these a little bit early so we can see what they do. Basically, they took Incredible, those big, huge, gorgeous white blooms. They get a little floppy. Even though they're improved, but they've done one better by, I think what's happening is they're slightly smaller. They're more of a 4 foot tall, 4 foot wide. And I think Incredible gets 5 feet tall.
It's more 5 by 5. Yeah.
And the flowers, even though they're a little bit smaller, there's more of them. And they are on really strong stems. So you can get those really beautiful flowers and they don't get as smushed down to the ground. So that's going to be a really fun one to try. Sometimes in, those late July, August thunder showers, we do see some weighing down on our Annabelle type hydrangeas. So this will be cool to put this up against the test.
As a hydrangea lover, it's hard when they're constantly improving hydrangeas and making better hydrangeas because now we have to constantly find more room in our garden for them.
Yes. The good thing is we just dug out, I almost want to count up what the square footage of this bed's going to be. It's a lot of room. Okay. So we're going from Eric's favorite to my favorite. We're going to talk about 2 roses that we're going to be adding into the garden. The first one is called Danahue. It is the new release this year in the United States from David Austin Roses. This is beautiful. It's a stunner. It has a medium, strongish, fruity kind of fragrance. They say it has lemon, lychee, and fresh apricot notes. We keep saying it's apricot. Everything we read says it's kind of yellow. I don't mind if it's an
the
apricot
color,
yellow.
you mean.
Yes, the color. Oh yeah, no, I was talking about fruit still.
Yeah.
But no, in the color, it's everybody says it's kind of yellowish, but all the pictures look a little apricotish. So
all the pictures look gorgeous, and
Yeah,
so I
who
don't
cares?
really care what color it's going to be because I
Absolutely.
think it's going to look fantastic. It's got darker stems, really deep, rich green foliage,
Mhm.
and for us, David Austin Roses do very well. And despite the sizing they say on their website,
Mhm.
we find that sizing to be kind of unreliable in our growing zone. They tend to
Yeah.
get bigger
Yeah.
than it says on the website. So we kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's supposed to get. Did you already share 3 to 4 to?
Yeah,
3 to
it's
4
3
feet
to 4
wide?
tall, 4 to feet wide, 4 to 5 feet wide. It's supposed to be a medium compact, which it's so funny to think of a 5-foot tall rose as a compact plant.
My favorite rose from Proven Winners is the Honey Apricot Flavorette Rose. And so they have a kind of a new member of that family, and it is called Flavorette Paired Rose, Pear apostrophe D. And that is supposed to have a light pear flavor too, but it's more of a pink
Yeah.
and cream rose. Opens up nice and wide for the pollinators to enjoy it. It looks like it has a very similar structure and habit
Yeah.
to Flavorette
Honey
Apricot, but more within the pink family. And we love the pink family of roses. So I think this is going to be a nice addition. 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, full sun, hardy in zones 4 to 8.
There are a few more shrubs that'll be included along in this border, but honestly, as we're mentioning these hydrangeas and roses, I'm realizing that we're not exactly sure where all of these are going to be going. And you can see there's a lot of room. So that's going to be a lot of fun for us to be placing things and figuring out the layering and all of that. But of course, when we're talking about contemporary cottage, you cannot have a cottage garden without perennials in it. And we are going to start with 2 of our favorite perennials that are both in the garden currently. One incredibly successful, one that we brought in late last season. So we haven't really seen it officially take off. But part of our garden aesthetic is really a lot of repetition of the same plants in different locations. So luminary, backlight, phlox. Backlight. Did I say backlight?
You
Yes,
did.
I did.
Backlight white.
Backlight. Backlight white?
Backlight
Backlight
white.
because
Phlox, they're white.
Yes. And there's also luminary prismatic pink phlox. That's the one that we added in additional to it. This is one of the healthiest plants in the garden, period. It's absolutely beautiful. The bloom time was weeks and weeks and weeks. I feel like we had 6 weeks where there was still white color coming on there. The green of those leaves, besides being completely powdery mildew resistant, it was just lush and dark and almost like velvety. Like it was really eye-catching. So we need more of it, and that'll really pull that interest around the whole back of the house. We also like the fact that it gets about 3 feet high, 2 feet wide, so it's not gonna, take
If
over.
you can keep the groundhogs away from it.
Yes, and I don't care. I might put the chicken wire fence up around it.
You could,
yeah, just like a little invisible cage, because they're my favorite. So I can't wait to see what happens with them. Those are a zone 3 through 8, and they love the full sun. Then we have a grass. Got to have that to mix in that nice strappy texture. So we're going in with a pretty cool one. I think this is on the newer side, the Prairie Winds Niagara Falls Panicum.
And it's blue.
Yes, it's like a powdery steel blue color. I like this one a lot. It gets wide. It's like a 4 feet wide by 4 feet high. And one thing I like about this grass, sometimes you have like a miscanthus. It grows and it's beautiful, strappy foliage, and then the blooms on top kind of don't match. I think sometimes like when there's like a red on top of the green and white ones, I don't know. I don't like that color. The Northwind gets little cream colored seed heads on the top of it. So it's just like, soft and blows in the wind over the really pretty blue foliage. Zones 4 through 9, loves the full sun. I think that's going to be nice. Just when you have vignettes in the garden, sometimes you need a little transition. And what better way to do it than with a nice blocky, strappy blue grass? And that will help connect the dots sometimes.
The perennial that I am most excited about adding to our garden is a Vernonia. It is new for this year, or new for next year from Proven Winter. So I guess they're sending it to us early to kind of test it out for them.
Yeah.
It is an ironweed, and we have ironweed native to us here in New York, and it is very tall and
plant.
gorgeous. But this is a more compact version of ironweed with that intense saturated purple bloom. 2 to 2.5 feet tall, 3 feet wide. It's going to be hardy in zones 4 through 9. It is full sun. And they call it, what is the name that they're calling it?
Prairie Princess.
Prairie Princess. Sounds correct for our garden.
I think that sounds wonderful.
And it is a North American native perennial. It's a late season pollinator favorite. This is mildew resistant foliage, which is great, and it is deer and rabbit resistant. So I know already that it's going in this back corner somewhere where our back of our yard abuts some woods.
Yes, and the deer do like to make their presence known, so that we will not be giving them things they like to eat. Yes, and then of course the standard, the perennial that is required in our garden, all of our beds actually. I don't think we have a bed that does not feature Walker's Low Catmint.
It's a classic. It's highly fragrant. It blooms 3 times a season for us. Once it's done blooming, you hack it to the ground. It pushes another set of blooms. Hack it to the ground. It pushes another set of blooms. If you don't want to hack it to the ground, you don't have to. That faded foliage will just lay flat, and then the new stuff will come out of the center. But we kind of like to keep it a little bit tidier. The pollinators adore it. It is a pollinator magnet. You will see bees all over it all the time. So we prefer Walker's Low Catmint for its size and its robustness. If it's too big for you, or you find that it flops too much for you, it might be getting too much water, it might not have enough sun, you might want to investigate one of the newer varieties that have been bred to be smaller and stay a little bit more upright, something like Cat's Pajamas or Cat's Meow or something like that. But we really like Walker's Low Catmint.
Definitely.
Accent time.
Accent time.
Evergreen accents. And we are so lucky that we're getting some gorgeous evergreen accents coming to us from Iseli Nursery. And the first one is a saguaro cypress called Blue Moon. It's a Chamaecyparis
Piscifera Blue Moon.
Piscifera?
Piscifera? I don't know. It's a saguaro cypress.
So it's a bright steel blue ball, and I love a blue evergreen, and this is a gorgeous specimen. It gets about 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide. It's a full sun loving evergreen that is hardy down to zone 4, and this is going to probably be a mid-border plant because of that ultimate size that it reaches. If we put it towards the front, I think 4 feet tall would definitely be too tall.
Yeah, it'd be a little weird.
We want to definitely think about taller things in the back, moving down to shorter things in the front.
Shorter things could include Picea abies Ripplebrook. This is a dwarf Norway spruce. No, we're not ever going to put a real Norway spruce right in the spot because it would be 50 feet
Too
wide.
big, gorgeous,
Too big.
but too big.
So this actually is a really cool kind of dwarf spruce. It really spreads out to 3 feet wide and 1.5 feet tall.
And I think the name, sorry to interrupt, but the name is so indicative of what it looks like. It's called Ripplebrook.
It kind of ripples.
It looks like undulating water. It's really interesting.
I did see a side note that this could be trained on a very, very small trellis. So I almost wonder if maybe we were thinking about any rocks or boulders in this area, if this would be something that we'd want to put near something.
That is exactly what I'm thinking. If what I'm thinking, which we'll talk about soon, is coming to fruition, it's still in the planning stages.
I love these specimen evergreens, especially the little ones right at the front of the border, because they draw you in a way that, yes, there's beautiful flowers and lush and everything, but what is that? You know, I think of the icebreaker Korean fir.
I was just thinking of that. Everyone stops and looks at it.
Yes, and it's actually planted in front of the luminary backlight phlox, which has the dark green leaves, and that Korean fir is so bright blue, everyone stops to look at it.
The next specimen evergreen, which isn't necessarily so much as like a specimen, but it continues with that thought process of repeating things throughout the garden. And you know, we have a lot of boxwoods in our garden. We have a lot of different varieties. Winter gems, we have new gens, we've got many different ones. The most we have are sprinter boxwoods. They do very well for us. So we're adding more sprinter boxwoods into this border. probably just a trio of them to help soften an edge of something, and it
Yep.
just will mirror the 3 boxwoods we already have right here on this edge of the garden. And so it provides that continuity and it provides visual rest.
And those can get up to 4x4, zones 5 through 9.
We won't let that happen to ours.
No, we'll be keeping them in a nice globe. We have found they do grow a little bit faster than Winter Gem, which is what they're an improved version of. And because of that, especially when there's a heavy snowfall, they can get pretty flopped. But when you go in there and do a nice hard prune in the springtime and you build that interior branching, they build right back up into a nice globe shape. But this actually is one of those plants that could, in fact, take a little bit more shade, which is going to work perfect because we've planted them often as a border around the base of trees, and as those trees grow.
All of these things, of course, could change. That's our caveat for this video because we're brainstorming and we're thinking about the design. But we have the main structure kind of figured out in our head. But once we get the plants in our possession and we can start placing them,
It changes everything.
Yeah, that's when it's really going to come together. But this is a great time to bring up, well, what do you do when the smaller specimen arrives and you're putting it in a place that's going to accommodate its future mature size? What do you do with that empty space while you're waiting? It's a great time for annuals.
Absolutely. This is the time when you get to play and experiment. And in our case, we've actually left quite a few places in the garden where we know annuals will always go because we like the change of color, the change of texture, and you want to be able to play in the garden. So when we have a smaller evergreen that ultimately would be 4 feet wide, this is going to be the time when you bring in those annuals and you get to experiment. Sometimes it's actually fun with annuals because you think, do I want yellow here? I think I might want yellow here. I know, let me put a yellow annual in this location for a season. And if you like that color, then you can commit to a yellow rose or a yellow daylily or something that's more of a permanent planting. So playing with annuals will be something that we get to do a lot of. But also, it's not just the annuals you go to the garden store to buy. There's also the opportunity to plant seeds specifically for this area. You know that we love Verbena bonariensis, so we won't have any seeds and seedlings sprouting up from the ground like we do in other places in the garden. So I'll probably either start some seeds indoors or scoop up the millions of seedlings we'll have in the garden and place them in there because that texture is just so perfect. Also, in these jars right behind us here are dahlia seeds and zinnia seeds that I harvested from last year's Floret Originals that we grew. So some of those will probably be making their way in there. I haven't really planned too much in ground for annuals that I'm planting from seed this year, but stay tuned. In a couple weeks, we'll be talking a lot about the seed starting and that kind of business. But yes, this is a great time to play when you've got your annuals going in the ground.
We are tossing around a couple of ideas as far as hard goods and hardscape are concerned. I would like to see, and this is just kind of in a daydreamy wish list kind of way, some types of boulders, and ideally those boulders would be around a water feature of some kind. Now, we are talking to some people about some certain water elements, one of them being a pondless waterfall,
Yep, that's
which
a
I think
potential.
would be really cool and have lots of boulders around it. And that would go right in this space here. So as you're walking through the path where it kind of narrows, you go right up to this trickling pondless water feature. And that's where that Ripplebrook Norway spruce would cascade over those rocks into the pondless water feature.
And ultimately, it would be partially underneath the Arctic jade.
Yes.
This big, beautiful Japanese maple, maybe with some boulders and rippling business, and the evergreen. That's a lot of gorgeous right there.
I think it would be really pretty, but it depends on, cost and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Also in that spot, I'm considering, and so is Christopher, obviously, a reflection pond, which is also a water element that's in ground, but totally different. It's much more still. It's much darker. It's a little more contemporary. I just worry about the mosquito element, and I don't know if I need to talk to people who have more experience with reflection ponds, versus
Moving water.
yeah, pondless water features that have like trickling waterfalls. If you do have experience with either of those, and you prefer one over the other, or you think both of them are a terrible idea, just let us know in
Let
the
us know.
comments. If we don't go that direction, it's going to be some sort of fountain.
Yeah.
Because I think there has to be water in here. We're adding a new fountain on the east side, which we'll get to in another
it's
video.
good. It's a good
Then
one.
we have our fountain by our terrace. So I wanted a third fountain or water feature in the west border. Definitely boulders, rocks. We have a bench from my grandmother that my mom is willing to part with. She's had it and she's finally conceded to allow us to put it in the garden. So I'm excited
beautiful.
about that. It's a beautiful wrought iron bench. And then we'll obviously add in some more of our favorite urns to keep that continuity going throughout the garden.
Well, thank you so much for joining us as we daydream and plan out this west border. And hopefully you've taken some inspiration from the way that we like to begin a design process for a big garden, even a small garden, because all of these ideas we could absolutely scale down to something much smaller. And I'm pretty sure there's a few areas that will be doing that too. Anyways.
And we're really excited to have you join us on the journey throughout the entire season. Again, I'm Eric.
And I'm Christopher.
And we're Grow For Me Gardening.
Thanks for growing with us.